Why are you still passed over for promotions while the loudest, least competent person on your team pulls in $250,000 a year? Why does your online store struggle to get 10 sales a week while basic dropshippers clear 6 figures a month on TikTok? You have the technical skills, you outwork everyone in your Slack channel, you chug a double-shot Starbucks cold brew at 6 in the morning just to sync up with East Coast market hours, yet your bank account remains completely flat. The uncomfortable truth is that your technical brilliance is a liability. Your raw talent is actively working against you. In the real world, competence is nothing more than a baseline commodity. The global marketplace does not pay for what you can do. It pays for how well you navigate the irrational, deeply flawed biological operating systems of the people around you. You are losing because you treat human interactions like a logical math equation. Humans are not logical computers. They are chemical algorithms driven by ancient status loops, status anxiety, and a primitive need for social survival. If you do not understand these hidden rules, you are essentially trying to play chess while your opponent is playing poker. Every ounce of your hard work is being neutralized by people who know how to pull the invisible levers of human nature. Let us look at how this plays out on an ordinary Tuesday morning in any corporate office or digital business in America. Imagine a software engineer named David. David is a genius. He spends 12 hours a day locked in deep focus, refactoring messy code and fixing critical bugs that save his company millions of dollars. He assumes his work speaks for itself. He skips the optional virtual happy hours on Zoom. He does not reply to the casual threads in the team Slack channel. He skips the free glazed donuts in the break room because he considers office small talk a waste of his intellectual battery. Now look at Sarah. Sarah is a mediocre marketer. Her spreadsheets are full of formatting errors. She constantly miscalculates basic conversion rates. But Sarah understands the primitive human brain. She knows exactly when to laugh at her manager's terrible jokes. She knows how to frame her minor wins so they look like massive corporate victories on LinkedIn. When the senior vice president role opens up, who gets the corner office and the massive equity package? It is not David. David is left staring at his monitor, feeling bitter, blaming a rigged system, while Sarah moves her things into the executive suite. This is not an isolated incident. This is a repeatable law of human biology. Your technical skills can get you through the door, but your psychological radar is what determines your ultimate altitude. Most people are catastrophically bad at reading human nature because they look at what people say rather than what they do. We are conditioned by society to accept the curated social masks that people wear. We assume that when a coworker smiles at us during a cross-department sync, they are happy for our success. We believe that when a business partner praises our new product launch on an unprompted phone call, their admiration is genuine. This naivete is the psychological equivalent of walking through a dangerous neighborhood with $100 bills taped to your jacket. The humans around you are constantly projecting a highly sanitized version of themselves. They want to be seen as autonomous, deeply intelligent, and morally righteous. Underneath that curated veneer lies a dark catalog of insecurities, irrational impulses, and evolutionary defense mechanisms. If you only interact with the mask, you will continue to get blindsided by corporate politics, backstabbed by partners, and ignored by your ideal clients. To win, you must develop a cold, diagnostic eye. You need to view the human social landscape the same way an experimental scientist looks at a petri dish full of bacteria. You must strip away the noise, ignore the polite pleasantries, and focus entirely on the hard, repeatable patterns of human behavior under pressure. Let us start by breaking down the single most destructive social force in the modern American workplace: hidden professional envy. Envy is not a conscious choice. It's a biological response to a perceived drop in relative social status. In the evolutionary hierarchy, when someone next to you gains resources, power, or attention, your own survival odds theoretically decrease. The human brain interprets a peer's promotion or a competitor's massive financial windfall as a direct threat to its own existence. Because society deems envy a shameful emotion, no one will ever admit to experiencing it. Instead, they repress it. It leaks out through passive-aggressive behavior, subtle corporate sabotage, and calculated corporate whispers. Think back to your very first corporate job or your early days trying to build an online business. You likely encountered a manager or a senior peer who seemed overly supportive on the surface. They showered you with public compliments that felt slightly off. They wrapped their criticisms in sarcastic jokes that left you feeling deeply uncomfortable in front of the entire team. They flattered you in a way that felt more like a mockery than actual praise. Then, the moment you moved to a better company or launched a competing brand, you discovered through a random LinkedIn message or an old coworker that this exact person had been spreading false rumors about your integrity. They claimed you were fired, or that you stole proprietary data, or that you took credit for someone else's work. This is the classic signature of a dangerously envious person. The masses believe that envious people are easy to spot because they expect open hostility. This is an enormous mistake. Real, dangerous envy wears the costume of extreme enthusiasm. If you want to run a definitive diagnostic test on the people in your professional circle, you must learn to watch their immediate physical reactions to good news. The next time you secure a major client, clear $50,000 in monthly recurring revenue, or get selected for a high-profile corporate initiative, announce it casually during a video call or an in-person meeting. Do not look at the team as a whole. Focus entirely on the eyes of your closest peers. For a fraction of a second before their conscious mind can activate their polite social mask, their true nature will leak out. You will catch a micro-expression of cold hostility, a tightening of the jaw, or a sudden look down at their keyboard. Their words will say, "Congratulations, this is incredible news," but their eyes will project pure resentment. You can run the inverse test just as easily. Drop a small piece of bad news about your business or your personal life into a casual conversation. Mention that your latest ad campaign flopped, or that you lost a minor client, or that your car broke down on the way to the office. Watch for the micro-expression of joy. It will look like a brief, involuntary smirk or a sudden relaxation of their facial tension. The Germans call this Schadenfreude, the secret pleasure derived from another person's misfortune. Once you diagnose an envious individual in your orbit, you must realize that you cannot reason with them. You cannot fix their insecurity by being nicer to them. In fact, your kindness will only deepen their resentment because they will view it as patronizing.
The only logical response is to remove yourself from their line of sight or to strategically deflect their focus. If you are forced to work alongside a deeply envious peer, you must go into low-profile mode. Never brag about your personal life, your investments, or your vacation plans. Keep your communications strictly transactional, dry, and professional. When a major win occurs, do not claim sole ownership. Immediately pass the credit onto a shared system, an automated software tool, or an institutional process. Frame your success as a stroke of pure luck or a team-wide fluke rather than a result of your superior intelligence. By lowering your perceived status in their eyes, you deactivate their biological trigger. You become uninteresting to them, and their malicious attention moves on to a new target. This brings us directly to the concept of social masking. The modern professional landscape is essentially a high-stakes costume party. We do not show up to a corporate performance review or a high-ticket sales presentation as our raw, authentic selves. If you said exactly what you thought during every Slack sync or client onboarding call, you would be blacklisted from your industry within 48 hours. We wear specific, socially engineered masks to navigate different environments.
We have a mask for the tyrannical boss, a mask for the sensitive coworker, a mask for the external auditor, and a mask for the high-value investor. Wearing a mask is not deceptive or unethical. It is a biological necessity for maintaining social cohesion. A person who prides themselves on being entirely authentic all the time, who brags about having no filter, is simply a social liability. They are universally disliked, avoided, and cut out of lucrative opportunities because they create constant friction in the machinery of business. Your objective is not to fight the existence of these masks, but to become an expert at reading the small cracks where the true personality leaks out. Think of how young children observe the world. They do not listen to the sophisticated arguments of adults. They focus entirely on the tone of voice, the physical tension, and the underlying energy. This is why professional liars and corporate politicians despise children. Their sophisticated verbal scripts do not work on them. You must recover that primitive ability. When you are negotiating a contract or evaluating a new hire, turn down the volume on their spoken words and focus on the data leaks. Watch for the forced smile that does not engage the muscles around the eyes. Listen for the sudden shift in vocal inflection or a subtle stutter when the conversation moves toward accountability, deadlines, or financial metrics. Observe how fast they speak when they are trying to gloss over a weak point in their quarterly presentation. Do not make it obvious that you are analyzing them, or they will immediately retreat behind a thicker psychological wall. Simply sit back, maintain a calm baseline, and let their own anxiety do the work for you. To truly understand a person's future behavior, you must look past their current charm and analyze their historical character. Most professionals make the fatal mistake of hiring employees, choosing business partners, or selecting romantic mates based entirely on attraction, credentials, and initial presentation. They are blinded by a polished resume, a high-status LinkedIn profile, or a charismatic presentation over a steak dinner. This is the psychological equivalent of buying a car based entirely on its paint job without checking the engine. A person's true character is a deeply ingrained behavioral operating system shaped by early childhood conditioning and long-term psychological habits. It remains static across their entire life. The fundamental rule of human tracking is simple. People never do something just once. If a business partner cuts a corner on a contract or lies to a minor client and tells you it was an isolated incident, they are lying. It was not an anomaly. It was a repeatable pattern showing through their mask. They will do it again to a major client, and eventually they will do it to you. Human beings are creatures of repetition. They are trapped in behavioral loops that they are often completely unaware of until it is far too late. The absolute best window to observe a person's raw character is when they are placed under acute, unpredictable pressure. When a critical server goes down, when a key client threatens to sue, or when the company faces an unexpected cash flow crunch, the polite social mask disintegrates instantly. The psychological energy required to maintain the persona is redirected entirely toward survival. This is your moment to observe their core architecture. How do they deal with sudden responsibility? Do they immediately look for a scapegoat in the team group chat? Do they panic and freeze, leaving their employees stranded? Or do they step up, remain flexible, and absorb the impact with cold execution? Value character above all else. A partner with mediocre technical skills, but a bulletproof, flexible, and highly integrated character is infinitely more valuable than a brilliant sociopath who will sabotage your entire enterprise the moment the market takes a downturn. You must learn to recognize and aggressively avoid the standard toxic character types that populate the modern economy. First, beware of the hyper-perfectionist. On the surface, they look like the ultimate employee. They work late, they obsess over every detail, and they demand absolute excellence. But look closer at their underlying motive. Their perfectionism is not driven by a desire for a great product. It is driven by an intense, neurotic need for total control. They use impossible standards as a weapon to disempower their subordinates and protect their own fragile ego. They will gatekeep projects, stall launches, and refuse to delegate because they are terrified that any variation from their vision will expose their deep insecurities. Second, identify the relentless rebel. They hate authority, they mock company policies, and they position themselves as the edgy truth-tellers of the organization. They will frame their rebellion as a strategic stance, but their rebellion is simply a childish trauma loop left over from their relationship with their parents. They cannot function in a structured system. The moment you give them a firm deadline, a critical performance metric, or a piece of constructive feedback, their rebellious instinct will turn directly against you. They will split your team into factions, create toxic sub-channels on Slack, and actively undermine your leadership from within. Fourth, eliminate the big talker. They are the masters of the corporate pitch and the LinkedIn thought leadership post. They speak in grand, abstract terms about scale, synergy, and disruptive innovation. They claim to have massive networks and deep connections with high-level venture capitalists, but when you look for their concrete, verifiable outputs, the trail goes completely cold. They boast about projects they have never actually executed and results they have never actually delivered. They are psychological parasites who trade on the energy and hard work of the executors around them, consuming resources while contributing zero real value to the bottom line.
Fifth, watch for the pampered prince or princess. They enter the workplace with an innate, unearned sense of entitlement. They believe that certain mundane tasks are beneath them. They expect special treatment, flexible deadlines, and constant praise simply for showing up to the office. If they do not receive absolute accommodation, they throw subtle, adult versions of a childhood tantrum. They will perform passive-aggressive silent treatments, drop their productivity to zero, or file complaints with human resources. They view the entire business through the lens of what it can provide for them, completely ignoring the basic economic reality of value exchange. Sixth, be incredibly careful around the savior. This is perhaps the most dangerous type because their toxicity is masked by extreme altruism. They are always the first to volunteer to help you fix a problem. They will offer to stay late to clean up your messy spreadsheet, provide unprompted career advice, and give you everything you need to succeed. It feels wonderful initially until you try to establish your independence. The moment you try to run a project without them or challenge one of their suggestions, their demeanor changes completely. You realize that their help was not a gift, it was a loan with a massive psychological interest rate. They were actively trying to create an asymmetric dependency loop, buying your loyalty and controlling your autonomy by making themselves indispensable to your survival. Let us transition to the law of covetousness, the primitive mechanism of desire. Look at small children playing in a park. You can place 100 expensive, shiny toys in front of them, but the moment one child picks up a specific, battered plastic block, every other child in the room will instantly abandon their toys and throw a massive tantrum to get that exact block. This childish algorithm does not disappear when we turn 30 and start working in corporate America. It simply updates its software. Humans do not desire things based on objective, intrinsic value. We desire things because other people want them. René Girard called this mimetic desire. We look at our peers to determine what is valuable. The moment we acquire the object of our desire, whether it's a promotion to senior director, a brand new Porsche, or a high-converting software tool, the chemical surge of dopamine drops to absolute zero. Familiarity and predictability are the ultimate killers of human imagination. We get bored with what we have almost immediately, and our psychological radar locks on to the next elusive target.
You can let this law destroy your career by constantly chasing things simply because everyone else on your LinkedIn feed is chasing them. Or you can learn to use it to engineer massive leverage for your own career and business. If you are an online entrepreneur or a corporate professional trying to climb the ladder, being completely honest, transparent, and instantly available all the time makes you boring and predictable. It commoditizes your brand. If a client knows they can text you at 9 o'clock on a Sunday night and receive a detailed response within 4 minutes, they will not respect your time. They will subconsciously lower your value because your availability implies that you have no other options, no other clients, and no competing demands for your attention. To become an elusive object of desire, you must deliberately introduce strategic scarcity into your personal brand. Stop being completely transparent. Do not reveal every single metric of your business or every thought in your mind. Wrap your work in a layer of mystery and selective isolation. When you present your quarterly results or pitch a new client, do not focus on how hard you worked and the mundane steps you took. Focus entirely on their unfulfilled desires, their secret professional fantasies, and their deep-seated fears. Shape their perception from the outside. Create the distinct impression that your time is a highly contested resource, that your business is backlogged with orders, and that other high-status companies are actively competing to get on your calendar. Just like children fighting over a single block, the executives and clients around you will suddenly experience an intense drive to work with you the exact moment they believe everyone else is trying to do the same. Now let us confront the concept of the internal shadow, the law of repression. Every single human being listening to this has a dark, unacknowledged side to their personality. Your shadow contains all the traits that your parents, teachers, and early employers told you were unacceptable. It contains your raw aggression, your intense selfishness, your deepest insecurities, and your unconventional desires. From a young age, we're trained to shove these traits down into a dark psychological basement. We project a clean, wholesome, safe persona to the world. We pretend we're entirely cooperative, peaceful, and content with our middle management positions. But psychology shows us that what is repressed does not disappear. It simply rots in the basement, grows more intense, and eventually breaks through our control during extreme stress, vulnerability, or digital fatigue. It manifests as sudden, self-sabotaging emotional outbursts on a company-wide email thread, passive-aggressive remarks during an important presentation, or sudden, inexplicable periods of deep professional burnout. The people who try to project absolute moral perfection are the most dangerous individuals in the economy. They are living a psychological lie. Their wholesome persona is a fake cardboard cutout designed to hide a raging internal storm. This is why the general public is so deeply obsessed with true crime stories, corporate downfalls, and celebrity scandals. It allows them to safely experience their own dark shadow traits through a screen. It's also why we're naturally drawn to highly successful, slightly eccentric founders and leaders. We subconsciously recognize that these individuals have stopped playing the game of absolute repression. They've integrated their shadow. They are authentic in their flaws, which makes them magnetic, highly relatable, and deeply compelling to the masses. Stop denying the existence of your internal shadow. Start running a regular diagnostic audit on your own hidden impulses. Pay close attention to the traits in other people that trigger an intense, irrational emotional reaction in you. If you find yourself deeply angry and offended by a competitor who is aggressively promoting their product, or a coworker who is loudly demanding a raise, look inward. You are likely projecting your own repressed desire for attention and power onto them. You hate them because they dare to do what you are too terrified to allow yourself to do. Admit to your flaws, your ambitions, and your darker drives. Do not use this knowledge to become a toxic person. Use it to fuel your creative and professional execution. Channel your raw aggression into 12-hour deep work sprints. Channel your intense desire for validation into building an undeniable software product. Allow yourself to be a slightly weird, a bit unconventional, and highly assertive in your business negotiations. When you embrace the entirety of who you are, you release an immense amount of psychological energy. You stop wasting your brain battery on maintaining a fake persona, and you instantly become a highly creative, independent force that cannot be easily manipulated by corporate conditioning.
Let us examine the law of narcissism, the spectrum of empathy. We live in an era of hyper-individualism, driven by algorithms designed to make us center stage in our own digital universe. All human beings are narcissists to some degree. We're trapped inside our own skulls, viewing every event through the lens of how it affects our immediate comfort, our money, and our social standing. This is a baseline biological survival mechanism. The problem arises when an individual moves along the spectrum to become a deep, clinical narcissist. These people are completely incapable of viewing the world from any perspective other than their own. They do not see employees, partners, or customers as independent human beings with their own valid needs. They see them as instruments, secondary tools to be manipulated to feed their endless craving for validation and attention. Consider a corporate dynamic between a mid-level director named Mark and a talented junior designer named Chloe. Mark is a deep narcissist. He micromanages Chloe's every move, takes full credit for her visual designs during executive presentations, and demands absolute availability via Slack at all hours of the night. One weekend, Chloe faces an unexpected crisis. Her mother falls seriously ill, and she has to spend 48 hours in a hospital room. She sends a polite, professional note to Mark explaining that she will be offline for the weekend and might need an extra day to wrap up the quarterly deck. How does Mark react? A rational leader would express empathy and adjust the timeline. But a deep narcissist views Chloe's family crisis as a direct, calculated personal attack on his schedule. He reacts with a cold, passive-aggressive silent treatment. He ignores her texts for a week, creating an intense atmosphere of career anxiety for Chloe. When he finally replies, he flips the narrative completely. He explains how her sudden absence caused him massive stress, how he had to stay up late to cover her work, and how his own reputation with the vice president was put in severe jeopardy because of her lack of commitment. Chloe is left feeling completely guilty, confused, and traumatized. She ends up working double hours and offering to handle Mark's administrative tasks just to get back into his good graces. Deep narcissists are masters of psychological gaslighting. They operate with an insatiable need for power because their underlying ego is incredibly fragile. They're terrified of being exposed as mediocre. If you cross them, if you attempt to set a basic boundary, or if you demonstrate true independence, they will stop at nothing to break your professional standing. They will spread rumors through internal channels, freeze you out of critical project alignment meetings, and make you feel entirely unstable. The single greatest countermeasure against this toxicity is the aggressive development of rational empathy. Empathy is not a soft, weak emotion. It is a highly sophisticated, cold cognitive skill. It is the ability to completely step out of your own ego, quiet your internal chatter, and map the psychological landscape of the person standing across from you. Empathetic professionals are incredibly resilient. They do not take office politics personally. When a client blows up on a call or a partner misses a deadline, an empathetic entrepreneur does not react with defensive anger. They instantly run a diagnostic routine. What is driving this behavior? Is this person dealing with pressure from their investors? Are they terrified of losing their budget? What is their hidden motive? By reading the room with objective clarity, you can navigate complex deals, disarm toxic narcissists, and position yourself as the ultimate, irreplaceable strategic partner in any transaction. This leads us to the law of irrationality, the myth of the logical thinker.
Go to any business school in the United States and they will teach you models based on the assumption that economic actors make decisions rationally. They assume people evaluate data, calculate risk, and execute the optimal path to maximize profit. This is absolute fiction. Humans are entirely biological organisms. Our modern brains are still running on emotional software designed hundreds of thousands of years ago. Our default settings are controlled by a very simple binary survival loop: avoid immediate pain, chase immediate pleasure. When a project manager screams at a junior analyst for a minor typo on a financial report, it is almost never about the typo. The manager is likely going through a high-stakes divorce, or their equity portfolio just took a massive hit, or they're terrified of getting laid off in the next corporate restructuring. Their rational brain cannot handle the acute stress, so it searches for an easy target to discharge the pain. They use the minor typo as a logical excuse to justify a massive emotional outburst. Because being wrong or changing our mind triggers an acute neural response similar to actual physical pain, most people will never admit they made a mistake. They will double down on a failing strategy, sink millions of venture capital into a dead-end product, and fabricate incredibly elaborate, logical-sounding justifications to defend an entirely emotional decision. If you want to operate at an elite level, you must first accept your own deep capacity for irrational behavior. If you genuinely believe you are completely logical, you are highly vulnerable. You will react blindly to market drops, make impulsive hires based on an initial positive feeling, and interpret your emotional biases as objective truth. Train yourself to increase your cognitive reaction time. When you receive a highly antagonistic email from a client or see a competitor launch a clone of your software, your primitive brain will instantly scream for a defensive, aggressive counterstruck. Do not touch your keyboard. Step away from your desk. Go take a walk. Force a 30-minute buffer between the emotional trigger and your operational response. Allow the chemical surge of cortisol and adrenaline to drain from your system. When you finally sit down to write your reply, your rational cortex will be fully back online, allowing you to craft a cold, calculated, and highly strategic response that serves your long-term goals rather than your short-term ego. Let us look at the law of short-sightedness, the disease of the present moment. The human animal is biologically wired to overvalue the immediate present and downvalue the distant future. In the wilderness, if you found a source of sugar or calories, you had to consume it immediately before it rotted or another predator took it. Long-term planning was a luxury that could get you killed. Today, this exact evolutionary drive is what destroys 90% of online businesses and keeps corporate workers trapped in middle management forever. It's the reason people can't stick to a clean diet, the reason they blow their savings on a leased luxury vehicle to look wealthy on Instagram, and the reason they abandon a highly lucrative content strategy after 3 weeks because they haven't gone viral. Look at how this mental myopia plays out at an institutional level. In 19th century India, the British authorities in Delhi decided there were far too many venomous cobras slithering through the streets. To solve the problem logically, they established a bounty system. They offered a substantial cash reward for every dead cobra brought to the government house. What happened? The locals ran a quick optimization routine. They realized they could make a massive amount of money by opening up massive, hidden cobra breeding farms in their backyards. They bred the snakes, killed them, and collected the cash. Eventually, the government caught on to the scam and canceled the bounty program. The breeders, now holding thousands of venomous snakes that had zero market value, simply opened their cages and let them loose into the streets. As a direct result, the cobra population in Delhi multiplied by a factor of 10 compared to before the program started. Academics call this the cobra effect, when an immediate, short-sighted fix creates massive, catastrophic long-term consequences.
You see the cobra effect every single day in American business. A startup founder needs to hit their quarterly growth targets to satisfy their angel investors, so they run a massive, hyper-aggressive discount campaign.
They bring in a huge influx of cheap, low-value customers. In the short term, the chart looks fantastic, but in the long term, they have completely degraded their brand value, destroyed their profit margins, and overwhelmed their customer support team with users who leave the platform the moment the discount expires. To climb above the dense forest of mediocrity, you must train your brain to think in multiple steps ahead. Before you execute any tactical pivot, before you fire a critical employee, or before you enter a public professional feud, pause and ask yourself a simple question: what happens next? What are the secondary and tertiary consequences of this action 3 months, 6 months, and 2 years down the road? Stop choosing the path that provides an immediate, shallow dopamine hit. Choose the path that builds permanent strategic leverage over time, even if it requires absorbing a high degree of immediate boredom and friction. Let us transition to the law of defensiveness, the art of high-retention persuasion. The average professional thinks that to persuade a boss to give them a raise or to convince a customer to buy their software, they need to present a mountain of undeniable data. They show up with complex pitch decks, endless case studies, and ironclad logical arguments. They are met with immediate resistance, closed body language, and a polite but firm rejection. They leave the room feeling completely frustrated, wondering why people are too stupid to see the obvious facts. What they failed to realize is that the moment you try to change someone's mind, you are launching a direct attack on their core identity. Human beings possess a deeply survival-driven self-opinion. We all subconsciously believe 3 fundamental things about ourselves. We are completely autonomous and independent. We are highly intelligent in our own unique way. And we are fundamentally good, righteous people who support the correct causes. The moment your pitch implies that their current workflow is inefficient, that their past software choices were stupid, or that their management style is flawed, their psychological shields go up instantly. Their brain enters a defensive fight-or-flight mode. They are no longer processing your data. They are actively looking for flaws in your presentation to protect their ego. If you want to become a master persuader, you must learn to work entirely inside their existing self-opinion. Look at how a sophisticated parent handles a rebellious teenager who has been suspended from school for selling illicit substances. The amateur parent screams, locks the kid in their room, and demands they study for 6 hours a day. The kid reacts with pure defiance, climbs out the window, and goes right back to the streets. A master parent takes a psychological approach. She sits down with the teenager and says, "The school principal thinks you are completely stupid. He suspended you because he believes kids from our neighborhood are incapable of learning from home. He is expecting you to fail your final exams so he can expel you permanently and clear his tracking metrics. He would be completely devastated if you somehow managed to get straight A's without ever stepping foot inside his classrooms." This shifts the teenager's primitive algorithm completely. Studying is no longer an act of submission to his mother. It is an act of defiance and revenge against the principal. He puts more energy into his books than ever before, driven by a deep need to prove the authority figure wrong. Never frame your ideas as a radical transformation that requires someone to admit their past mistakes. Validate their self-opinion first. Practice deep, tactical listening. Let them talk for 80% of the conversation. Mirror their phrasing, validate their past decisions, and make them feel incredibly safe, intelligent, and secure in your presence. Then smoothly position your new strategy or product as the natural, logical evolution of their own brilliant ideas. Let them take full credit for the plan. When they believe the idea was entirely theirs, they will fight to execute it with massive energy, completely unaware that they are running a script you engineered for them. Now, let us analyze the law of self-sabotage, the reality of your internal perspective. 2 solopreneurs, Marcus and Lydia, launch identical digital agencies on the exact same day. They have access to the same software stacks, use the same cold email templates, and target the same niche of e-commerce brands. Marcus operates with a narrow, hyper-defensive mindset. He is terrified of losing his tiny savings pool. He avoids hopping on sales calls because he hates the feeling of awkwardness and embarrassment when a prospect objects to his pricing.
He looks at the crowded market and convinces himself that the industry is completely saturated, that the big players have a monopoly, and that it's virtually impossible for a newcomer to win. He works with a constant undercurrent of anxiety and exhaustion. Within 90 days, Marcus closes down his laptop, cancels his software subscriptions, and retreats to a safe, low-paying corporate job, telling everyone that online business is a scam. Lydia operates with an expansive, explorer mindset. Her French language skills are mediocre, but she eagerly jumps on to international networking calls, laughs off her mispronunciations, and views every awkward interaction as an interesting data point to refine her approach. She builds deep, authentic connections with other founders who introduce her to high-value internal networks. Within that same 90-day window, Lydia scales her agency to $20,000 a month in recurring revenue. The objective reality did not change. The market did not favor Lydia over Marcus. The difference lies entirely in their psychological processing units. Your internal perspective is the filter that structures your entire universe. If you move through the world expecting betrayal, saturation, and failure, your brain will actively search for and highlight data points that validate that belief, while completely blinding you to massive opportunities. Stop adopting the cynical, highly fashionable stance of the professional victim. This modern trend of performance skepticism is nothing more than a lazy psychological shield designed to disguise a deep fear of failure. It allows people to avoid taking raw responsibility for their lives. Stop limiting your capacity based on past corporate trauma or childhood programming. Your biological machinery can handle an immense amount of pressure, complexity, and scale. When you approach your market with a ruthless curiosity, treating every obstacle as a puzzle to be solved rather than a personal insult from the universe, your external reality will rapidly shift to match your internal architecture. Now, let us analyze the law of grandiosity, the danger of the untamed ego. We've all experienced an intense surge of grandiosity, especially after consuming a highly inspiring business book, watching a viral documentary, or clearing our first $10,000 month in business. We stay up until 3 in the morning mapping out massive multi-million-dollar corporate roadmaps on a digital whiteboard. We imagine ourselves giving a TED Talk, getting featured on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, and completely revolutionizing our industry.
This initial grandiosity is not inherently evil. It provides a massive chemical dividend of motivation and willpower that can jumpstart a new project. The catastrophe occurs when this grandiose feeling loses touch with your actual execution capacity. You begin to believe your own hype. You start to think you are a natural genius who doesn't need to do the boring daily tracking work of business. You jump from one fantastic project idea to another, leaving a trail of half-finished, unlaunched websites and broken code in your wake, because the actual reality of hard execution cannot match the quick fantasy in your head. To run a high-performance operation, you must ruthlessly channel your grandiose energy away from your ego and directly into your day-to-day metrics. Be deeply honest with yourself about your actual skills. Having a grand vision for your company is completely useless if you lack the operational discipline to close 3 tickets a day or send 50 cold emails a week. Choose a single, highly reasonable goal that is situated just slightly above your current execution level. If you are currently making $5,000 a month, do not design a strategy to hit $1 million by next quarter. That is a childish fantasy that will lead to immediate paralysis the moment you hit a real roadblock. Target $10,000. Focus on an optimization goal that forces you to stretch your skills, learn a new automated workflow, or upgrade your sales script without completely shattering your operational capacity. Seek out regular, brutal feedback from the actual marketplace. Your customer data, your churn rate, and your cash flow statement do not care about your grand ego. They tell you the absolute, unvarnished truth about your current value delivery. Listen to them, adjust your strategy step by step, and let your actual results do the talking. This brings us to the law of gender rigidity, the balance of operational traits. Modern corporate culture loves to segment behavioral traits into rigid boxes. We are told that hard metrics, cold logic, aggressive negotiation, and hierarchical control are exclusively masculine traits. We are told that intuitive empathy, creative collaboration, fluid adaptability, and community building are exclusively feminine traits. If you allow yourself to be trapped by these rigid boundaries, you are functioning at half capacity. You are operating with a severely damaged psychological toolbox. The most lethal entrepreneurs and corporate executives in America are those who refuse to conform to behavioral expectations. They possess a fluid balance of traits. They can sit in a high-stakes board meeting and execute a cold, ruthless financial restructuring with absolute precision, and then walk into a product design session and leverage a deep, intuitive empathy to map out the exact emotional journey of an anxious user. Stop policing your behavior based on artificial expectations. If you are a leader who relies entirely on top-down authority and cold analytics, you will eventually face a massive, silent mutiny from your team. They will stop communicating openly. They will hide critical product flaws from you, and your retention will drop to zero. You must cultivate your intuitive, empathetic channels. Conversely, if you are a highly collaborative leader who focuses entirely on maintaining absolute harmony and emotional comfort, your business will quickly devolve into a chaotic, low accountability playground that gets destroyed by leaner, more aggressive competitors. You must develop the ability to enforce firm boundaries, cut underperforming assets without hesitation, and use cold logic when the survival of the enterprise is on the line. Build a comprehensive psychological toolkit that allows you to deploy the exact behavioral trait required by the specific situation, regardless of societal labels. Let us confront the law of aimlessness, the high-performance sense of purpose. We have all heard the stories of senior partners at major corporate firms or venture capitalists who finally achieved their ultimate goal of clearing $10 million, only to slide into a massive, deep depression. They find themselves sitting in a multi-million-dollar home in the Hamptons, ordering expensive late-night DoorDash, staring at a wall, feeling completely empty inside. They achieved exactly what the American dream told them to want, yet they are completely miserable. This happens because wealth, fame, and status are not ultimate destinations. They are simply fuel. If you put high-octane fuel into a car that has no steering wheel and no destination, you are simply going to accelerate into a brick wall. Without a higher sense of mission, your professional achievements will quickly feel completely hollow, and you will find yourself trapped in a vicious loop of chasing more money simply to fill a fundamental gap in your identity. To build an integrated life, you must uncover your deep vocational calling. Look back at your childhood and your early 20s before corporate conditioning took over. What were the activities that you found yourself drawn to naturally? What were the puzzles you would gladly spend 8 hours solving for free simply because your brain found the process intensely engaging? Your true edge usually lies at the unique intersection of 2 or 3 disparate fields. It is where your deep love for clean software code intersects with your understanding of human behavioral psychology, or where your background in classical literature collides with modern digital marketing analytics. Find that intersection. That is your unique operational moat. Build a structured ladder of descending goals to keep your brain focused and free from anxiety. Your long-term mission should be massive, ambitious, and slightly terrifying. It should give you a distinct sense of direction over a 10-year horizon. But because a massive 10-year goal can easily cause decision paralysis, you must immediately break it down into a sequence of smaller, bite-sized operational sprints. What do you need to execute this quarter? What do you need to complete this week? What is the single most important task you need to finish before you close your laptop today? By focusing your daily energy on these immediate steps, you maintain a powerful sense of momentum and purpose, while completely protecting your brain from the chronic stress of aimless execution. Let us analyze the law of conformity, the reality of group dynamics. In the 1950s, a psychologist named Solomon Asch ran an experiment that exposed the absolute fragility of human independence. He placed a participant in a room with 7 other individuals who were secretly actors hired by the researcher. He showed the group a single line segment and then placed 3 comparison lines next to it. One of the comparison lines was exactly the same length as the original, while the other 2 were visibly different. He went down the line and asked each person to state which line matched. In the early rounds, everyone gave the correct answer, but then the actors began to purposefully state a completely incorrect line as the match. When it came to the actual participant's turn, surrounded by 7 people confidently shouting out an obvious lie, over 75% of the participants chose to ignore the objective data of their own eyes and conformed to the group's incorrect choice. You are not immune to the Asch conformity algorithm. The way you structure your day, the software tools you buy, the marketing strategies you deploy, and the corporate values you champion on LinkedIn are heavily driven by the social groups you belong to. We conform because our primitive biology knows that isolation from the tribe meant certain death in the ancient world. The problem is that in the modern digital economy, the herd is almost always wrong. The herd is broke, stressed, addicted to notifications, and trapped in a loop of low-leverage labor. If you allow yourself to blindly absorb the collective mindset of your corporate department or your local entrepreneur meetup, you will automatically recreate their mediocre financial results.
You cannot escape the pull of group dynamics, so you must learn to choose your tribe with extreme surgical intent. Build what Robert Greene calls a reality group. Surround yourself exclusively with individuals who possess a high sense of purpose, absolute intellectual honesty, and a track record of execution. In your team meetings and masterminds, establish a hard rule. Focus entirely on the objective data, not on the status or hierarchy of the person presenting it. Encourage radical candor. Give your team the freedom to ruthlessly criticize your strategic assumptions without fear of triggering your ego. As a leader, realize that your team is hypersensitive to your emotional output. If you show up to a Slack channel or a Zoom sync projecting panic, instability, and uncalibrated anger, that emotional toxicity will cascade through the entire organization, paralyzing your developers and destroying your customer support baseline. Project a steady baseline of calm focus, clear tranquility, and unstoppable execution, and your reality group will automatically scale their efforts to match your frequency. Let us move to the law of fickleness, the mechanics of sustainable authority. Human beings are deeply ambivalent about leadership. We possess a dual biological urge. We want to be guided, protected, and led by a strong figure who can navigate uncertainty. But we also possess an intense, deep-seated resentment of authority. We value our freedom and autonomy. The moment a leader behaves like a tyrant, takes too much corporate credit, or exposes themselves as a hypocrite, the team's subconscious algorithm shifts instantly from loyalty to a deep desire for political mutiny. They will nod along on video calls while actively polishing their resumes and planning their exit strategy behind your back.
Real, sustainable authority is never demanded through top-down corporate titles or loud assertions of power. It emerges naturally from the alignment of your character and your daily execution. To lead effectively, you must lead entirely by example. If you expect your engineering team to pull an all-night sprint to deploy a critical software update, you would better be live in that Slack channel with them, reviewing logs and unblocking workflows. If you expect your sales team to make 50 cold calls a day, you need to grab the mic and close a high-ticket client live in front of them. Practice extreme active listening. Treat your position not as a personal privilege, but as a massive responsibility to serve your team. Protect them from external corporate politics, give them the tools they need to execute, and pass the public praise entirely down to your subordinates. When your team realizes that your authority is built on competence, respect, and shared sacrifice, they will follow you through the most brutal market downturns with absolute trust. Let us analyze the law of aggression, the management of internal pressure. Aggression is a core element of human biology. It is the primitive energy that our ancestors used to fight off predators, secure territory, and hunt for survival. In modern professional life, we no longer use clubs to settle contract disputes, but our aggressive impulses have not mutated. They are simply channeled through passive-aggressive Slack messages, calculated snubs at corporate retreats, and subtle compliance traps engineered to destroy a competitor's project. When you encounter an intensely aggressive or defensive individual in business, recognize that their behavior is almost always driven by an underlying sense of deep insecurity and acute vulnerability. They feel exposed, so they strike out to terrify the room into submission. Do not repress your internal aggression or pretend it doesn't exist. That is a fast track to physical illness and chronic psychological burnout. Aggression is like steam inside a pressurized boiler. If you do not provide a structured release valve, it will eventually rupture the tank. Stop letting your aggression leak out onto your coworkers, your employees, or your partners. They do not deserve your emotional garbage, and doing so will permanently destroy your professional network. Take that raw, intense, aggressive energy and focus it entirely on your hardest strategic problems. Turn your aggression toward optimizing your database architecture, building a lethal marketing funnel, or completely out-executing a massive competitor in your niche. Be incredibly persistent. Refuse to accept defeat from the market. When you channel your primitive drive into focused, high-leverage work, you transform a destructive emotional liability into an unstoppable economic engine. Let us explore the law of generational myopia, navigating the spirit of the times. Every single one of us is an automated product of the specific historical era we were raised in. Your tastes, your views on work-life balance, your comfort level with digital platforms, and your core financial beliefs were deeply shaped by the specific economic environment of your youth. This creates a collective mental filter known as the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times. The trap occurs when we become older and allow our thinking to harden. We become stuck in our ways, viewing the habits and technologies of the younger generation as lazy, stupid, or entirely superficial. We look at new shifts in automated distribution, algorithmic video platforms, or decentralization models, and we dismiss them because they don't fit our existing framework. This generational blindness is how multi-billion-dollar legacy companies get completely wiped out by 3 developers working out of a small apartment. To stay highly competitive, you must actively fight against generational rigidity. Do not isolate yourself within your age bracket. Actively surround yourself with mentors and operators from completely different generations. Pay close attention to how 20-year-olds consume information, process transactions, and communicate on digital channels. Do not judge their behavior, simply study it as a cold sequence of consumer data. At the same time, look back at past historical cycles. The macroeconomic frustrations, the market bubbles, and the technological disruptions your generation is currently experiencing have happened dozens of times before under different names. Study the great financial operators of the past. Adapt their timeless strategic principles to your current tech stack. By bridging the raw wisdom of the past with the fluid distribution models of the present, your work will automatically find a massive, high-leverage resonance with the market. Finally, we must confront the absolute psychological baseline of all human behavior, the law of death denial. Let us look at a basic pattern of human execution. You give a corporate employee or a freelance developer 3 months to complete a comprehensive technical report or build a client website. What do? They spend the first 10 weeks procrastinating. They fiddle with their Notion templates, organize their desktop folders, attend endless alignment meetings, and scroll through industry discussions on Reddit. They do zero actual work. Then, during the final week before the hard deadline, a sudden panic hits. Their brain realizes that failure is imminent. They lock themselves in their office, order late-night Uber Eats, block out all notifications, and execute more high-value work in 48 hours than they did in the previous 2 months combined. The proximity of the deadline completely strips away their low-leverage distractions and forces an absolute hyper-focused alignment of their cognitive battery.
Now lift your focus away from that single project and look at the trajectory of your entire life. We are all running on a strict, unextendable biological deadline. We're going to die. It is the ultimate, non-negotiable deadline for our conscious existence. Because the reality of death triggers an intense existential anxiety, our brains choose to repress it entirely. We live our lives pretending we have an infinite runway. We convince ourselves that we will launch that online business next year, that we will fix our physical health next quarter, and that we will spend time on our true creative passions once our corporate career settles down. We waste our peak creative years on empty status games, mindless digital consumption, and safe, low-leverage compliance, as if we had all the time in the world. Let us run a cold, objective mathematical analysis on your remaining biological runway. Suppose you are currently 30 years old. If you stay completely healthy, you can realistically assume you have about 30 more years of peak, high-energy cognitive output before the inevitable biological degradation of aging takes over. 30 years sounds like a comfortable amount of time, but let us run the actual deductions. Out of those 30 remaining years, you will spend exactly 1/3, 10 full years, unconscious in your bed sleeping. Deduct 10 years. You will spend an average of 2 to 3 full years stuck in traffic, commuting to an office, sitting in unproductive transits, or managing standard domestic logistics. Deduct 3 years. You will spend another 2 full years handling basic biological maintenance, showering, grooming, cooking and cleaning your living space. Deduct 2 more years. Let us say you spend just 2 years on basic entertainment, taking necessary vacations, and spending casual time with family or friends. Deduct 2 years. When you subtract all the baseline maintenance from your total runway, you're left with exactly 11 to 13 years of actual, focused time to build something of true significance. 11 years. Think about how fast the last 3 years vanished into your screen. You entered 2023, you blinked, and suddenly 2023, 2024, and 2025 were completely gone. Years disappear in the modern digital economy like water down a drain. You do not have an infinite runway. You are actively burning through your real resource every single second you spend sitting in an alignment meeting that could have been an email or scrolling through a curated feed of people you do not respect. Stop denying your deadline. Wake up every morning and consciously remind yourself that your time is a decaying asset. Use this existential clarity not to induce panic, but to fuel an unshakable daily operational focus. When you maintain an active awareness of your deadline, your perspective shifts instantly.
You stop taking office politics personally. You lose all interest in trying to change the minds of toxic, defensive narcissists. You stop people-pleasing. You stop overcomplicating your strategy, and you stop waiting for the perfect set of market conditions to launch your enterprise. You look at your remaining years, you pick your highest sense of purpose, and you execute with a cold, relentless focus. Your immediate homework is to look at your calendar for the next 48 hours. Find one recurring meeting, one toxic interaction, or one low-leverage task that is actively consuming your finite biological runway. Delete it, automate it, cut it out entirely. Clear that space, lock your focus onto your core moats, and start playing the game of human tracking at an elite level. If you found this strategic breakdown valuable, look at the screen right now. Watch our masterclass on the mechanics of power execution. Stop wasting your runway. Start building.